Hey guys, my name is Matimio, and today I decided to have some fun and went back and played some Battlefield 3, but with a twist on it and only killed my enemies with the crossbow. The Xbow was easily one of my favorite weapons. Like, I have more kills with this gadget, or with this contraption, whatever you want to call it, compared to any weapon in Battlefield 4. I have around 1,100 kills with the crossbow, and I think like the FAMAS or the L85 is around 1,000 in BF4. And so clearly I adore this weapon, and the reason why I love it so much is that it's just a hell of a lot of fun to use. It's as simple as that. It is a fun weapon to kill people with. You have to predict where they're moving. It doesn't matter if they're 2 feet in front of you or 50 feet in front of you. Granted, if you're able to snipe someone that's 50 meters away, that is one of the coolest things to do in the game. But even if they are 5 feet in front of you, you still have to have some skill involved at taking them out. You had to predict their movement because it had a very slow travel speed. The bolt, or I think it's called the bolt, the standard bolt didn't travel very quickly. You also had to make sure that you nailed your shot, because if you missed, you had to go through a 4-second animation to get another bolt ready and back into the action. And so just in general, if you were able to go on a kill streak and kill even just 2 people in a row, it was incredibly fun. Another reason why I loved it so much is that it fit very well with the recon class. You guys already know this, I'm pretty much preaching to the choir. The recon class, balance-wise, isn't supposed to do well up close. It's meant for long-range combat. If you're using a bolt-action rifle, you're gonna dominate people at a distance, but if they start to close the gap on you and they're only 20 meters or 10 meters away, you're gonna have to have some fancy footworking or be really good with your secondary weapon or have some quick scoping abilities to try and take out that guy before they're able to blow you away with their assault rifle or their carbine. But as soon as you switch out your MAV or your tugs for the crossbow, all of a sudden, technically, you can dominate pretty much anyone in any situation. You got your bolt-action rifle for long-range combat, and if anyone tries to close the gap on you, you foil their plot with your crossbow because it's a one-shot kill, I think, to any part of the body except for the legs and maybe the arms. I'm not exactly sure on that last part, but at least the legs. If you're able to get a chest shot, you're gonna drop them. And I can't tell you how many times I played as the recon where someone thought that they were clever, they were closing the gap, using the environment, making themselves a harder target, and then as they got close enough, I was like, all right, sure, you wanna have this dance? Whipped out my crossbow and then slapped them in the face with a bolt right to the dome piece. And when you're able to have those moments and you're able to line it up, God, like I said, there isn't many things cooler or more satisfying in Battlefield 3, and it's because of those moments why I just adored this weapon. The downside of this loadout, though, is that you do have to give up some pretty incredible gadgets. Like the tugs and the MAV were incredibly powerful back in Battlefield 3 because they allowed you to know exactly what was about to round the corner on you. Like if you use them correctly, you put the MAV on top of a building, it not only helped you identify where the enemy was heading, but it also let your teammates know what was up and what was just around the corner. And so if you did give up these gadgets, it did put you at a disadvantage. Like there were some times, or there's gonna be times, where normally you would have had the tugs down on the ground, you would have noticed the guy about to round the corner on you on the minimap, but because you're using the crossbow, he's able to get the flank off and take you out. So while, you know, sure, the crossbow made it so that you could dominate almost in any situation as long as you were a better shot, if you didn't know where the enemy was and they're able to flank you, it doesn't matter how good of a shot you are if you don't know where they are, and so there were a lot of times when that was a pretty large drawback. The one thing I could not get over, though, during my play session was, why isn't this available in Battlefield 4? I realized that this was a DLC weapon back in Battlefield 3. It was for the Aftermath DLC, and for a lot of people, they really didn't see the appeal of this gun, at least as much as I do. You know, it had 4 different bolts. It had the standard, the balance, which allowed you to snipe, but hardly anyone used it because it really wasn't that great. It had the explosive bolt, which once again wasn't all that great, and then the scan sensor. And for the most part, while it's cool that you have these options using the crossbow, every bolt is pretty much inferior to every other weapon in the game. If you're gonna take out a tank, you're gonna use an RPG. Like, sure, it's great that you have this explosive bolt on it, but honestly, it's not gonna get the job done. If you're gonna snipe someone, you're gonna be using a bolt-action rifle. You're not gonna use a balance bolt to take someone out at a distance. And for a lot of people, they just saw this as a gimmick, and rightfully so. Like, for some people who never used it before, never put as much time into it, I can see where they're coming from, because if you just use this with the assault rifle or the assault class or even really any class in the game, it's like there's gonna be no situation where I run through all of my ammo with my primary weapon, I run all the ammo through my secondary weapon, and then I'm all left floundering like, oh man, I wish I had a crossbow right now. Like, no, there's gonna be very few situations where that actually gets you killed. And so I 100% understand why people thought that this was a gimmick. Most people would have preferred having normal primary weapons added into the game, especially considering that the Close Quarter DLC added 10 new weapons, and I think Strike at Karkin, or Return to Karkin, or Back to Karkin, that's what it was called, also introduced 10 new weapons, so a lot of people were a little peeved that they didn't get more weapons with the Aftermath DLC, and we only got this gadget. And maybe it's just because I'm being selfish, and I want something that I liked and a lot of people didn't. But honestly, the Xbow was so much fun to use, and even though I realized that some people thought it was a gimmick, because it suited the recon class, or maybe this should just be for a recon only exclusive weapon, because it was so satisfying for that kit, I would love if they added it back on in. Another thing I was not expecting though during my playtime was how successful I was going to be with this playstyle, because I did something like this in the past. I did a terrible weapon challenge with the Xbow back in Battlefield 3. It was like a year and a half ago by now, but I did decently well. You know, killing 3 people in a row, killing 4 people in a row, I was really excited. But for whatever reason, maybe it's just because I'm going against a lot of newer players, because Battlefield 3 was free for like a weekend, and if you picked it up, you got it, like you owned Battlefield 3. So there's a lot of new players added on in, and so maybe it's just because I'm going against people that aren't very skilled, but I was going on these ridiculous rampages. Like, I killed like 9 people in a row, and while I feel like I'm a decent player, maybe above average for some games, I was not expecting the amount of people that I was taking down left and right. So it was just a hell of a lot of fun. But I'd love to know what you think about the Xbow. Did you love it as much as I did? Did you think that it was maybe more of a gimmick and you'd rather them introduce new weapons with the Final Stand DLC, since we already know what we're going to be getting for Dragon's Teeth? Let me know down below. But until tomorrow, guys, have a good one and take it easy.